You've set the room for a siege that may only last until dawn, and may last longer than your courage, unborn scene. Either way, you have given the dark as little to work with as a person can. Night settles properly now, not as a curtain, but as a wall. The rushlight throws a coin of yellow on the table and then changes its mind at the edge. Everything beyond is guessed rather than seen. The hearth keeps its sensible face, a low, obliging flame behind a screen of ash and split sticks, the sort that glow more than they swagger. Smoke climbs without mischief. The thatch utters those small sideways sighs that mean snow is practicing but not yet plotting. You have the first watch and the room knows it. Breath eases, shoulders sink, people let go of their day and hand it to you in trust. This is the hour for small luxuries that don't spend tomorrow. You warm a pebble at the hearth and roll it in your palms to bully blood back into your fingers. You tuck a sliver of time into the kettle, nothing grand, just enough to make the steam smell faintly of a garden that's asleep under straw. The child is permitted a corner of toasted bread with a lick of dripping painted so thin it shines. They hold it with 2 hands as if wealth were a temperature. Talk reduces to the sort of whisper that remembers there are rafters listening. You keep it kindly, a riddle, a short saint's tale without the sermon, the village's old joke about the Reeve's pig that respects curfew more than the Reeve. The old man hums a psalm that is mostly vowels and warmth. You leave him the dignity of forgetting a line and skip the tune forward as if that were the plan. The goat sighs the way wise women sigh when they know men have made too much of a small thing. The cat uses you as furniture because furniture is warm. You mind the rushlight. It is an obedient servant if you treat it as a living thing. You tilt the holder to keep the tallow from running away from the burning edge. Pinch the wick with damp fingers if it grows proud. Strip the char that would otherwise fall like a spark at the wrong moment. You turn the hot stone with the rag you've kept tucked at your belt. A new seam of heat leaks out and finds cold toes. You do not chase warmth with sweat. That is a child's bargain and a night thief. The damp campaign continues quietly now, but still. A sleeve hung too low gets lifted 2 finger breadths. The palliasse is propped the thickness of a spoon. The drip wick is wrung and rehung before it remembers a worse habit. You lend the room a breath gap at the shutter, 1 count of 5, while the fire behaves, then shut again. You can feel the place breathe. It is not romance. It is carpentry and ash and the knowledge that air exchanged carefully now is sleep rescued later. You let your hands do the slow work that ties hours together, carding a fist of fleece into something that looks like cloud with an opinion, spinning a yard of rough yarn on the drop spindle twist, steady wind, tidy a rhyme under your breath to keep the spindle's patience, whittling a peg from an offcut to replace the one that split this afternoon, oiling the hinge pin with a smear of goose fat until it thinks better of squeaking at midnight. You wrap your knuckles with a touch of tallow, the cheap balm that stops skin from tearing when cold tools ask for service at dawn. People turn in their sleep. You translate the movements without fuss. A blanket edge slipped the wrong way becomes right way. The child's cap that has marched off an ear returns to a decent post. The old man's hand that went wandering comes home beneath the covers, so heat stops leaving through an honest wrist. You make the breath cave for yourself and for them in turns, cloak over mouth and nose, draw and release air, warmed to human before it is human's problem. It seems a silly little craft until you recall the night you forgot it and were punished with a cough that felt like iron filings. Outside, the snow has found its voice. Not a storm yet, more the sound of flour against a board, fine and relentless. The church is asleep. The last cart has long since grumbled home, and the lane's hedges are reciting their old winter prayers. You think there is nothing left to do except keep the ember honest and the watch agreed. And then the wrong kind of knock arrives. Not the neighbor's courtesy, two knuckles, two beats familiar rhythm through a familiar palm. Not the Reeves stuff, three hard raps followed by a shout with a name and a matter. This is a dull thud at the lower board, then another, as if someone found the door with their shoulder and would rather you believed it was an accident. Silence. Then the small sound of breath that doesn't belong to anyone inside the room. Everything you have set in order wakes at once. Your hands know where the bar is. Your eyes know where the rushlight stands. Your feet remember the iron. You do not lift the bar. You do not. You step to one side of the latch so the crack, if there must be one, is between wood and your shoulder, not wood and your ribs. Your voice goes out first, flat and practical. Name yourself. No answer. The old man has already sat up with a grunt. The child has made that wide-eyed shape that means you are their geography. The goat thinks theology and offers to butt salvation into the matter. You keep your tone the way you keep a fire steady. Name, house, business, village custom is older than your nerves. If you are kin, you say so. If you are in trouble, you say what sort. If you are a thief or a fool, you test the patience of a street that does not like to be woken. You hear a shift in weight and a scuff that sounds like ice on boot leather, and then at last a voice too bright and too merry for midnight. Only a traveler, it says, which is the worst answer on a curfew night. You answer with the truth. A poor household can afford. We sleep. Try the alehouse door for a bench. If it is truly a soul in need, the alehouse has a settle near a banked hearth and a host who is paid to think kindly about the world. If it is danger, the alehouse has a bar thicker than yours and men who snore with cudgels to hand. You exchange no more than that. You lift the rushlight and shade it with your palm so there's no friendly beacon to aim at. You keep your weight against the bar. You listen. Another thud, not quite a knock, lower down the plank. Your mind starts its silly theatre wolf demon Reeves pig with a learned vice. You kill the theatre with chores, count the faggots under your breath. Feel the rag for the hot stone test. The caps place on your skull. You rap back once with the poker iron to wood a village signal that says we're awake and not alone, because sound carries across a hedge into a neighbor's ear, along a row of doors that will quietly draw a bar tighter if the night turns odd. You hear right enough a sleepy cough from Rowan's cottage and a whisper of a shutter shift. The street has woken into a net. Name you say again, because rituals are ropes. This time the voice tries a different mask, almost a girl's tone. Midwife, it says, which would open half the doors in Christendom if people were as soft as they pretend. But midwives have a way of asking the world for help, and it is not this. They name the mother, they name the house, They cry the saint to shame you into moving. You answer the ritual with its proper mirror, whose the pause is wrong by exactly the length of a lie being sown. You put your hand flat on the wood and feel no answering tremor of a stretcher against the door. No scuffle of two men with panic, only that overbright breath. You keep the bar. You keep your voice. The bell you say loud enough for the lane to hear. Well, ring it, which is an old trick against wolves' men, and otherwise you bang the skillet with the ladle 3 blows, the village cry for trouble, and snow muffles less than people suppose. If it is need, help arrives faster. If it is mischief, mischief moves on to where bars lift easier. You lift the ladle, give the pan its speech. The sound goes up like iron speaking Latin. Across the hedge, a second pan answers. The wrong knock recedes, not too hurried, but recedes. Footfalls scuff. Someone swears a friendly oath in the sort of voice that cannot help sounding like the word we. You keep the bar. Your heart comes home to you by degrees. After there is the quiet that follows overrated theatre. You go round the room once without apology. Bar sits, latchcloth holds, rushlight sound, hearth obedient, hot stone warm, drip wicks doing their honest best, people honourably pretending they didn't wake. You mutter the village benediction under your breath. Doors tight, luck light, keep right, and it is as good as any prayer that will get through a thatch. Small luxuries become medicine again because fear leaves a draught behind it. You pour a thimble of warm beer for the old man, so his cough comes home gently and not like a blacksmith. You give the child the solid job of counting spoons aloud to 5 and back the sort of task that convinces sleep it is welcome. You sit by the hearth cloak round knees and let your breathing tell the room what to do. If you're the sort that believes in charms, you tuck a sprig of something dry rosemary maybe, or a scrap of last summer's lavender behind the beam and tell yourself it's for moths. If you're not, you do it anyway, because it smells like mornings with windows open. When the hour has steadied and the rushlight has swallowed another inch, you wake the old man with a touch that says honor rather than obligation. His second watch is a habit as old as his stories. He takes your stool, your rag, your quiet list. You give him the room in the same state you received Itember honest bar down, people counted. You lie down into straw that remembers with a grateful noise you hope no one heard and make your breath cave. The goat rearranges her theology. The cat adopts your shins. The draft forgets your name for a while. Outside snow thickens its handwriting on the lane. The roof keeps counsel. Somewhere not close, the alehouse door lifts and sighs, and a bench takes one stranger's tired bones. Inside, the watch is kept, which is the only boast a winter night will allow. It is the hour that has no friends. A pause in the night when time goes thin and the cold grows a crown. You wake because your skin knows. Before your head does, the room has slid a degree lower. The straw has surrendered, one more whisper of warmth. The breath cave is not enough. The old man's watch is done. His ankles are two small complaints under the blanket. The goat has stopped muttering theology and gone quiet, never a good sign. Even the rushlight trimmed neat burns as if it would rather not. The roof tells you the story you didn't want wait. There is a new soft creak along the purlin, a timid cry from the thatch as flakes have wed themselves to a slab, thawed refroze. and now sit like a guest with no intention of leaving. Not danger yet, but a pressure you can taste. You set one palm to the main post and feel the slow, honest throb of wood bearing load. The cottage is still your ally, but it asks you to be clever. At the hearth, the ember is near ruin. Nothing dramatic, just the old rusty look of ash that has won its argument. Two sullen eyes alive under it no more. Here is the choice that breaks tempers: spend fuel or spend strength. Throw on wood and you'll buy heat you'll beg for again at 3 in the afternoon. Hoard fuel and you'll pay now with shivers that make hands stupid and thoughts unkind. You kneel side on and behave as if patience were a tool. Pull back a palm's width of ash no more, until one ember brightens from old iron to gold. Lay a lattice of slivers, the proper kind cut, when you could still smell July, then one honest splint to bridge them, not the proud stick that would roar and vanish. Breathe a thread through your warmed cloth. Fire answers in syllables, not speeches. It is enough to keep the heart, not enough to boast. You feed a faggot's pride, with one and only one extra sliver for later. You tell yourself a small lie you will forgive. That will do. The roof's weight you cannot ignore. Going out now is a fool's errand. The latch would steal your heat. The step would steal your balance, and the eaves would choose that moment to shrug their burden into your collar. There is a trick the old houses know. You take the roof pole, the stripped sapling that lives by the door for mornings after snow, and you stand where the main tie meets the wall plate. You incline the pole up beneath the thatch, not to jab at it, but to give the straw a new path for its load, a kind of crutch. A gentle lift, no more than a sigh's worth. You listen for the groan to settle 2 notes lower. Sometimes it does. Tonight it does. The goat answers with a small approval, as if she thought of it first. Strength or fuel, the argument returns. There is a third way taught knee to knee, never written. You give back what heat you have without losing all you'll need at dawn. It goes like this. First, you stop chasing heat with sweat. Keep the cloak on in bed, cap down, blanket edges, right way. No gallant turn by the fire. No steaming your feet until you wet the wool. Warmth you buy with damp is winter's favorite debt. It will come back for you when the fire is low and courage is a rumor. Second, you move, but in the blanket and like a miser. Hands under armpits, press and hold for a count of 20. Release, repeat. Calves flex, hold, let go. Thighs a slow brace, not a shake. Shoulders a quiet squeeze of back against palliasse, then ease. It is the work of a minute here, a minute there, just enough to persuade blood round corners, not enough to make a damp you will curse. You do it for yourself first, then you teach the child with a whisper rhyme press, and count keep heat about. They grin, then do as told. Third, you lend breath. The old man's mouth is doing the open fishy work of a body that has forgotten the temperature of air. You make the breath cave for him with your cloak, your own lung warmth traded carefully into his. 5 slow breaths. You retreat and let the trick keep its work. The room looks the same. The room is not the same. Fourth, you rotate heat, not fuel. The hot stone has sulked itself to sleep near the bed's foot. Back to the hearth with it rag in hand, stone rolled no heroics. 2 minutes near the embers count. Them don't guess then back under the blanket and to the coldest feet. You move the child a hand's breadth towards the center. Move yourself to where their heat was. Shift the old man's blanket edge so wool, not air, meets his wrist. Beds without curtains learn curfew with geometry. Fifth, you stiffen the room's edges. The draft at the door has found a new path. You feel it on your shin like a lie. You take the rush plait the child made and jam it under the threshold seam. You tuck a wisp of straw into the shutter's leeward corner where the hasp bites. Little walls to keep the big walls promise. Only then do you allow the hearth another inch of luxury, a thumb length of split wood, no thicker. A gently turned ember, a breath and ash pushed back over like a blanket on a stubborn child. The flame withdraws into its work. The room by slow terms remembers the treaty. Your stomach wants to be unhelpful at this hour. There is a hunger that arrives with cold, loud, but not urgent. You answer it with a sip of hot water, turned into an almost tea by the memory of time in the kettle and a lick of warm beer if you have it. You give the child the smallest soldier of toasted crust, no feast, just a sensible command to a complaining gut. The old man refuses and then accepts, and in the taking finds his breath steadier. The goat stands. Good. A standing goat is a goat with opinions. You top her pail with the spoon of water warmed by the hearth, never hot, never cold enough to chide the belly. You shake a thumb of ash under the hen's beam. Lice consider migration and give up. Damp tries to recruit allies. You deprive it of recruits. You listen to the roof again. The weight is there but not sulking. Every house makes its own hour music. You recognize tonight's score. The rushlight needs a pinch. You trim it, and the sudden brightness is enough to see the little frost ferns above the hood begin to sigh into droplets that hang, choose not to fall, and then change their mind. You set the drip bowl and the rag wick accordingly. It looks fussy. It is rescue on the scale winter understands. There is a pride that tempts you now to make a bright comfort, throw a real log sit like a lord in your shirt, and pretend the world is yours. You refuse it. You sit instead like a householder who means to own tomorrow as well as this hour. Cloak round knees, cap down, breath, even hands tucked, one palm always ready to feel the embers promise through the ash. You rehearse the list under your breath until it becomes a lullaby. Poker cold side out, pot far shoes pointing stone, warm bar down, wicks rung. At last the hour loosens. The goat resumes theology. The old man's breath keeps time. The child who had been secretly counting with toes stops counting and begins dreaming. The ember holds its red like a stubborn berry. You lie back, shoulder to shoulder, with the straws. Good crackle cloak tucked at the nape, to trap the last of your earned warmth and let the room keep you. If dawn finds you mean and tight with wood, it will also find you whole. You have spent neither fuel nor strength foolishly, and learned the third way between heat, traded like coin, small careful, never in a handful, and always with an eye on the ledger of the day. The dark loosens where it's thinnest, a pewter smear along the shutter line. It isn't light, yet so much as the idea of it enough to make your eyes believe they're useful again. You feel it before you see it. The room's pitch eases by a shade. The goat shuffles, as if she too has read the hint. And the old man's breath changes from the deep metronome of night to a shallower tide that means his bones are negotiating with morning. Then the eaves begin their small treachery. Not a flood, only a slow counting of drops, thaw trickles, testing the straw ridges, choosing paths. Each one finds the old familiar seam, and your rag wick shows you its brilliance by shining at once. You ring, rehang, set the bowl without cursing. A cottage that sweats is still a cottage that holds. Above the hood, those little frost ferns you watched at the hollow hour let go in beads that suspend themselves like thoughts, and after a polite pause give in to gravity. This is the kindly face of winter, deceptive but kindly. Hope arrives the way it always does, at a grey edge. It tells you lies that sound like reasonable plans. Throw a proper log, it says. Air the place just for a minute, it says. Take a step outside without all that palaver of pins and mitts, it whispers, because look, spring. You learn to hear the accent on that last word. It isn't spring, it's morning. That's all. You bank today's courage carefully rather than spend it at once. The ember kept its side of the bargain sullen but alive. You give it a modest kindness, pull the ash back to a palm-wide crescent. Lay a thin ladder of dry splinters, add one split no thicker than your thumb, and breathe through cloth warmed under your cloak. The flame stands up like a sensible councilman, not a jester. You hold the proud log in your hands and put it back. Afternoon will need it more than this polite dawn does. The room asks for a purge, and you give it the measured kind, not the heroic. 2-finger lift on the shutter, one slow count of 5, whilst the fire behaves down again with the hasp seated and a twist of rag in the usual corner. The air changes without stealing the night's hard-won heat. Steam trades places with the sharper stuff and doesn't carry your comfort out with it. That is door discipline, learned the honest way. You test the door, but not with your heart. You test it with your hand. Latch cloth checked, bar lifted and settled to see it still goes. A whisper of a crack to listen to the yard. The sound out there is the sound of an idea trying to become weather-fine flour, sifting tiny grains, striking wood. You close again, not yet. Hope will tell you that just to look won't cost you. It will. Heat is a miser. It remembers every foolish glance. Breakfast is a repair rather than a feast. Last ladle of last night's pottage a slice from the loaf. Coaxed warm at the hearth's edge on a prong stick, turned and turned until the crust remembers a kindness. Small beer in a mug becomes almost tea because the kettle stood near honesty all night. The old man gets first heat, then the child, then you. The goat makes a complaint, which you answer with the heel scrape and a promise of beat later. Promises count even with goats. The ragwicks shine again. You ring without thinking about it now and feel that tiny smugness you've earned. A second wick goes where a new trickle starts. Bowls are emptied into ash where it won't argue. The palliasse gets its 2-finger lift again. Damp under straw is how a day begins wrong. You turn the hot stone with the rag you kept tucked at your belt and move it from the bravest toes to the coldest. This rotation of small mercies is the third way's morning work. You hear the cock's tentative try at a crower polite clearing of the throat rather than a proclamation. Somewhere beyond the hedge, a bell gives the ghost of lords to a village that will call it prime in an hour, and be none the worse for the mistake. You take it as the sign to prepare for outside, not to go there. Here is how hope costs fingers. People see graying and fling the door wide for a breath, bare-handed on iron, bareheaded, to greet what they think is mercy. The room's weather collapses, the banked fire flares flat, smoke retreats, sulks, and then seeks your eyes. The thatch above the open door shrugs a little sheet of snow down the collar of the optimist who has stepped 1 foot onto ice, polished with night's sly work. Sometimes the eaves choose that moment to shed the slab that made you wary in the hollow hour, and a man is surprised that the sky has weight. If he's lucky, he's only wet and cross. If not, he counts to 9 in spring. So you do it right. You dress like a person who has learned that a minute is enough to ruin a day cap down until it argues with your eyebrows cloak pinned so water runs off, not into you, mitts on and tied rag on the latch boots that remember straw islands rather than the shiny troughs. You wedge a faggot against the inside of the door, so if it must open, it opens a handspan and no more. You set the roof pole ready and you stand to the hinge post side. If the eaves shrug, the door will take the insult and not your chest. You do not go yet. You listen 2 more breaths because dawn's politeness sometimes hides a sledge. You tend the beasts before outside becomes your business. The goat's water is edged with a new skim. You crack and top it with kettle warm, not cold, lest you teach her belly a lesson. Hay is shaken so dust falls where hens can gossip over it. Roots are split with the billhook and set in the manger as an apology. You scatter a thumb of ash under the perch. Lice consider the move and pack their bags. Little acts of authority, damp hates authority. A neighbour's voice comes through the door, seem the right way this time. Rowan's 2-beat rap. Then his name, then the news. Eaves on Meg's heavy. You answer with "we're in," and the litany of what you've seen trickle on north seam roof pole sets. He says they'll be around with poles when the light fattens. You agree and refuse to lift the bar now. He laughs the laugh that means you did the correct stubborn thing and moves on boots, churring on rimmed straw. Inside hope tries again with another mask. Feed the fire like summer. You've wood enough. You do not. Winter teaches sums. A loud blaze makes liars of afternoons. You choose the accountants, flame steady, modest, always there. You put a single longer split to bridge the next half hour, and you stop. Your hands don't trust you yet. You sit on them until they become sensible. The child asks if it's spring, and you tell the truth without unkindness. It's morning. You give them the grand task of the doorway, kneeling sentry, with the rush plait to push against any sly draft that finds the threshold. They glow with importance, and the threshold behaves. You show them the trick of watching the nailheads in the door when they dew the yards. Breath is wetter than sense. When they dry the air, thinks about behaving. Little instruments all around you if you look. Then, because it is the right sort of hope, the useful kind, you plan today's outside in your head. Order matters. Knock the eaves only after the snow has admitted it is snow. Fetch water once light finds your footing. Fodder before the lane wakes to gossip. Mark it if the bell and sky both permit. Roof round with rowan and a pole if the street decides to be a village. You put none of these into your hands yet. You keep the heat you've kept. There's the dangerous impulse to fling the shutter for a view. You barter with it. You lift a slat the height of a finger no more, and you see the world in a letterbox hedges smudged with white. Lane flattened to dull pewter. Your straw islands waiting like honest stepping stones. The churches cock on the spire stitched with frost and pretending bravery. A sheet of white slides from the thatch with a small, satisfied whoomp. You lower the slat before the room chases the sight with comfort it can't afford. You set the table for the inevitable damp that the day will bring back in floor rushes whisked to the door, then replaced dry. The drying rail given one new gap so shirts won't sulk into one another. The kettle swung off the crank, lest it steam the rafters into weeping. The hearth has found its day face quiet, competent, loyal. The rushlight burns a head shorter, and you pinch the char, saving its last inch for the hour that will truly need it. You rub a smear of tallow into the split at your knuckle before it remembers how to sting. Then you count the list aloud like a creed made of chores. Bar set latch cloth, wicks, rung bowl, emptied stone, turned cap down, mitts, ready faggots, now and night. The old man nods. The child repeats now and night, as if it were a spell, and the goat resettles on her knees, as if congratulating everyone. When the light thickens one more shade, and the bell tries a thin note that means men will meet themselves again in lanes, you let the door open the careful inch you rehearsed, and not before. Air comes in that is not a thief. Your face stings, which is honest. You close again with the sensible thud, and hold the warmth you've hoarded like coin. The first true graying has not made you foolish. That is the day's first victory. The next will be made with poles and straw outside, and with the same old discipline inside. As you pull the cloak about your shoulders and pin it by habit, you feel the cottage agree. We will meet this day with neither drama nor waste. You open the door the inch you rehearsed, and the day presses its cool cheek against yours. The world has been rubbed out and redrawn in chalk. Hedge lines are soft shoulders, the lane a hush with ruts, hidden under a clean deceit. The thatch wearing a cap with opinions. You hold your inch, listen once more, then set the faggot wedge aside and step out the hinge post way, so anything that drops will greet oak and not your rib cage. First business, the eaves without the avalanche. The roof pole you kept has a rag lashed at its tip so it won't pick a quarrel with the straw. You stand wide of the doorway, staff-footed, and test from below. Tap, don't jab. Start at the lower edge and work up in a neat stripe, a man combing a giant's hair. The snow sulks, then sighs and slides in a sheet that would have flattened dinner if you'd stood where a fool stands. You step back with it never under it and let it thump at your boot's toes, not at your chest. A second strip, then the corner where wind piled trouble in the night. Leave the high crown. It insulates more than it threatens. A bare roof invites melt, and a melt invites leaks. The trick is balance, not bragging. You mark danger as you make it. The heap below the eaves is now a bank with notions. You kick a trench through its middle so the next fall has somewhere to go besides your shins. You lay a stick across the path as a memory aid, step here, not there, especially when the light goes flat later and every surface lies about its depth. Now paths. Ash is winter's chalk and sand. You fetch the hearth bucket, cold ash only mind, and pinch it in your fist, casting in a thin, stingy scatter. Not a proud carpet, stripes. A line from door to well door, to byre door, to woodpile door, to lane. The grey against white is a map that keeps sleepy feet honest at curfew and gives dusk something to hold on to. At the worst, slicks. The plank by the pigsty, the trodden corner near the gate. You add straw islands, small knotted pads. You stamp flat, then pin with a twig. You don't make them too plush. Thick straw skates as finely as ice. Better thin and many a dotted way rather than a grand road. The goat leans her head out and tells you you're late. You give her the split root you promised and shake hay where her hooves won't grind it into a bed for damp. The hens talk treason from the perch. You scatter them a handful of grain on the dry side of the byre and watch their claws scratch the air into something like habit. You break the skim on the pail and top with kettle warm no shocks for bellies this morning. Rowan's shape arrives through the sift pole on his shoulder hood, up one mitten, ragged in a way that says it has earned the right. 2 raps on the post, his name and the plan. Round then, you nod. Hester calls from her door that the little one slept. Shell keep the kettle singing for the men. Old Meg waves a stick, as if it were a scepter, and says her eaves think themselves grand. The Reeves pig has acquired a beard of ice and a new philosophy. A roof round isn't a parade, it's a winter machine. The village has an order to it even when people pretend it doesn't. 2 with poles, long rag-tipped, 1 notch cut near the end to hook a mass if it fancies dangling. 1 with a shovel to pull the fall away from thresholds before it freezes into a siege. 1 with a besom to flick light sift from steps and knock the snow brim from privy roofs and wood lean-tos that haven't the sense to carry their share. 1 with a sack of ash and a barrel hoop of straw pads to lay where ruts will try their tricks later. You go door to door without asking for thanks. Loose, the front man says, and taps the eave in that tidy stripe. The second man stands off and back eyes on the edge, ready to hook a sulking sheet and bring it down before wind decides to throw it at someone. Clear when the shoulder of the heap is dragged to the side and stamped into obedience. Mark and the ashman pinches his thin lines, a grey writing that tells boots which way home is when the light forgets its manners. You learn to read roofs. The ones that shrug in a friendly way just need courtesy. The ones with the sharp lip and a glass sheen have been sitting through slight thaws and mean freezes. You give them longer poles and kinder taps. The ones with a line where the straw shows through in patches have a bold owner and will leak like gossip in thaw. You leave them be after the first safe pass, because straw is dear and winter is long. A thatch loves a firm hand in July. In January it wants patience and a pole with a rag. You mind the chimney's 2 low squat pots that wear little snow caps. A gloved fist to the cap edge, quick sweep a moment to watch the smoke. Up obediently means the hood is back to work. Sideways and sulkin means the wind has changed its text, and you warn the householder to behave their fire accordingly. The alehouse gets a thorough round 2 doors along eave, a roof that catches drifts like a habit. The alehouse benchroom is already warm enough that a stranger could sleep off the night. You nod and move on. Where the lane dips, you lay a little lattice of brushwood or fascine, job you prepared in autumn from hedge cuttings. So melt later will have something to run through instead of making a mirror out of the rut. You stake, bundle, and brush with withies at the corners. Even the pig will have to work to undo that lot. You thrust a wander peeled stick into the ditch edge at knee height every 6 paces, so nighttime knows where not to step. When snow thickens and the sky goes white on white, those wands are the difference between a neighbour's tale and a neighbour's misfortune. At old Meg's, you find the eaves shouldering a smug weight. Her door opens outwards in of the carpenter long forgiven and could jam under a slip. You tap along gentle patient, and the cap slides into your trench instead of at her ankles. She cackles a spell at the snow for theatre, and then sobers, as if she heard herself. You accept her thanks and her scold because both are warmth. Hester brings out a pan of something nearly tea steam, scenting the air with thyme and thrift. Cups pass hand to hand, mittens thaw a little. You pour a splash on the besom head to help it catch the light sift. The bell tries a note and gives uppits as cold as its own rope. You strike the shovel edge twice on a stone and call it a bell anyway. People answer with a wave out of habit. By mid-round, the machine purrs, loose, clear, mark, brush, wand. You fall into a rhythm that makes sense to bodies that would rather be back by a well-behaved ember. The ashman's hand goes grey to the wrist. The polemen's shoulders begin to talk. The shovel makes a path where yesterday's fall would like to become today's ice. Children watch from doorways with the solemnity of owls and the twitchy need to stamp patterns into virgin snow. You put them to work with straw pads and call them road wardens, and they glow warm enough to melt their own collars. There's always one door that opens too wide too soon. A young fellow with ideas flings his latched shirt sleeves bare to admire the clean world. The rush of warm breath, the suck of cold air, and the eve above him chooses that precise vanity to shrug. Rowan's hook finds the slab and turns it aside. It thuds into the trench instead of onto pride. Hinge post side lad, you say not unkind. He grins foolishly, blushes red as a pippin, and disappears to fetch his cloak. No sermon needed. The snow preached it for you. When the round reaches the church, the tower ladders have sense and stay where they are. You don't go up in this weather unless you plan to come down faster than you deserve. But you do knock the naves, lower eaves, and stamp the porch stoop clear, because that step has claimed more elbows than sin has souls. You lay ash in 2 neat lines up the path, so brides and coffins both can keep their footing when winter goes on longer than patience. Back at your door, you finish what you began, a last tidy of the trench. Ash lines freshened, straw islands checked and pinned, the wand at the well replaced, a second thrust near the latrine because dusk will turn that corner into a trickster again. The rag on your roof pole is soaked and proud. You unwind it, wring it, lash it back ready for the next showing. You tuck the pole by the hinge. The staff goes where a hand can find it without thinking. The lane looks like a plan, now not a hazard. Thin grey paths threading white wands pricking the edges, doorsteps that can argue with the day. The street hums to itself as shutters move and voices trade the simple news. Loose clear, Mark repeated as if it were a psalm. It is, in a way, a winter psalm written in ash and straw, and the good stubbornness of people who would rather see each other in spring. You step back inside the inch you allow, pull the bar to test its kindness and take stock. The hearth has held steady, ember red, with a modest flame chewing the bridge stick you gave it. Boots come off by the mat tongues spread not too close. Cloak shakes itself of sift over the threshold, and not the floor. A whisk broom sees to the traitors that tried to fall inside. The goat mutters that the village has made too much of an obvious thing, but she eats the beat as if it were a medal. You've turned a white weight into work done and paths drawn. If the sky doubles down at dusk, your door will still open, your embers will still behave, and your feet will know how to find water wood and sense in the dark. That is what a roof round is for, not heroics, just the quiet machine a street becomes when everyone turns up with a pole and a plan. You bring the day indoors and spend it like a careful coin. The roof round made the street a machine. Now the hearth becomes one. Winter is the season when a house proves whether it can bake without boasting, and whether a village remembers how to share heat as if it were a parish relic. The leaven survived the night because you courted it. Yesterday's lump kept under a cloth as if it were a sulky pet wakes slowly when you feed it a handful of coarse flour and the warm breath of the hearth. No balm off the ale today. The brewer's barrel has been mean. Never mind. The sour knows what to do, and so do you. You work in water that is blood warm by wrist, not by clever contrivance, and stir until the slurry makes a tired sigh. Set it near, not on the warmth. Wrap the bowl in a spare cap to teach it a little patience. Flour in winter has manners that need reminding. Wheat, if the year smiled, rye if it didn't. Barley for bulk, a pinch of oat for kindness. You sift by hand to chase rats, dreams out of the bran, and to feel with the wise pads of your fingers whether the meal is honest. A fist of salt dear stuff you bought yesterday without weeping goes in like resolve. You make the well, pour the awakened leaven, and fold not fight until shag becomes dough, and dough becomes a single thought under your palm. Kneading is winter prayer. Heels of hands, not fingertips. A push, a fold, a quarter turn. A push, a fold, a quarter turn. Breath steady, cap down, cloak off, because sweat is the enemy of patience. The board is dusted, not floured like snowdrift. Flour wasted is flour you will eat as smoke instead of crust. When the dough goes from grumpy to obedient, from tearing to stretching, you stop. Too much zeal is as foolish as too little. You pinch off tomorrow's leaven, dust it, and tuck it in the small earthen pot it calls home. That is tomorrow's mercy already in the bag. Proving in a cold house is an art with no saints. You cheat honestly. The bowl sits by the hearth where the air is warm enough to persuade, but not hot enough to make a skin. A woolen cloak over the top becomes a tent. You trap a little climate the way sailors trap wind. When the bellies begin to complain and the old man says, "It isn't rising," you show him the slow line where dough met bowl an hour ago and where it makes its new mark now. Bread takes its time, you say, and pretend you aren't watching it like a fretting hen. While the dough thinks you ready the oven, you've the little dome grafted onto your hearth clay straw, smoke black and stubborn. Last night's embers coax the kindling. Seasoned sticks follow. peat waits its turn. You feed the dome sparingly until the soot on the inside turns from wet black to ghost white, the old sign that says, now. A flick of flour on the floor if it flashes brown too quick. You leave the mouth open and let sense cool the clay. If it sits pale and sulks, you add one split and whistle at your own impatience. Neighbors arrive the way bread invites them. Rowan first with the basket covered in a cloth that once was a shirt. His loaves are marked with 3 scratches, his family's tally, since a reeve could write. Hester sends a boy with 2 small rounds tied crosswise with string, so no one pretends confusion. She pays in a twist of salt and a promise to turn your cheeses next week when your hands are busy with mending. Old Meg brings a dark, heavy thing that calls itself a loaf with the confidence of a queen. She has put beet water in the mix and is daring the world to dislike it. You make a list on your tally with chalk marks for marks, names for loaves, and clear a bench so baskets can wait where paws and hooves will not study them. Sharing heat is older than argument. You set the order by thickness and honesty. First, the flat thing soaked cakes on the hot stone while the oven is still boasting. Quick in, quick out, the smell of toast cheering the rafters. Then the small rounds that will forgive heat. Then the good loaves. Last, the sulkers. A wet rag wrapped on a stick becomes your swab. One firm sweep clears ash without throwing sparks. The peel is your long arm with a mind of its own. You flour it with stingy fingers and slide like you mean it. Doubt is how a loaf dies at the lip. Marks matter. You read the tops. Rowan's triple Hesters, string cut. Meg's carved star, your own 2 slashes that look like a wagtail's feet. The assize of bread never came into this cottage. Your assize is memory and fear of shame. You set a little pot of water at the oven's mouth to temper the heat and keep the crust from turning armor. The door brick leans in like a well-tempered lid. While the first batch finds itself, you spend the oven's false slack. Rushes you peeled yesterday go up on the rail above the hood to dry an honest smoke. The world will thank you at dusk when the rushlight doesn't sulk. A pan of beans takes the back of the hearth to remember how to be food by and by. The old man calls it a feast in minutes, which is to say an hour. The last of the onion skins and a heel of stale bread become broth in the kettle, the kind you advertise to no one and everyone smells. You slide flat stones in near the coals to bank heat for hands that go outside at curfew. You mind the damp as much as the fire. Shirts hang high and spaced, boots a shade off the hearthstone, the palliasse still propped a finger. The window sees a finger width of purge when the oven puffs. You close before heat thinks of leaving for good. The drip wicks shine. You ring and replace between peels. Your bowl for the drops sits where it won't collect ash like a hoarder. Then the song a loaf wraps hollow, and the room behaves like a chapel. You lift it and knock the bottom with a knuckle that knows. You listen for that polite drum that means done. Out onto the trivetta lattice of slats that keeps crust from weeping into leather. Rowan's rounds follow smaller proud. Hester's shy little ones need 5 minutes more turned at the mouth where heat is kinder. Meg's queen sits. You resist the urge to rebuke her with more time. She will taste of beet and opinion and will be food anyway. Barter begins without haggling because the ledger was written before the fire was lit. Hester presses 2 pins into your palm-cold luxury and says she'll mind the child while you go to the mill next week. Rowan shoves a faggot of good hazel your way with a look that says, "Don't make much of it," and adds a story about the Reeves pig that improves with repetition. Old Meg sniffs your loaf and says it wants a better scratch next time, then slips a paper of salt into your pocket because she saw you pay dear at the stall. You send each away with a hot heel wrapped in a rag. People argue less when their mouths are occupied and their hands are warm. The oven cools through its useful hours like a well-run day. After bread you slide in the beans, then a pan of apples if luck, and last autumn's hedge had you clever, then the dried rush pith to finish without scorching, then herbs that didn't diathyme, little hard leaves that will remember this smoke and tell it to tomorrow's pot. At last, with the mouth left open, the oven becomes a place to dry wet mitts without cooking them, and to let the old man's damp scarf remember sunlight. You slice your own loaf thin bread in winter. Is time not bulk and spread with dripping, as if painting a holy thing? The child eats with cathedral eyes. The goat gets the crust's ghost and blunt criticism of your slashes. The old man knocks his portion with a fingernail and nods as if you had passed an examination set by weather. Then you do the small, fussy future work that keeps a house honest. Scrape the board, sweep the ash, fold the cloths dry side in, tuck tomorrow's leaven deeper away from catgoat and impatience. Chalk the tally for what was borrowed and what was paid. A faggot pins an hour of watching a child a pan of beans to go to Meg when they remember how. You push the peel back into its corner like a sword that has done no harm and done some good. By afternoon's thinnest light, the door is barred again to the sensible inch. The house has spent heat as if it were a budget, not a windfall, and got bread beans, dried rush, warm stones, and soft tempers for it. The village has eaten because clay burned bright in one place instead of 10, and because people remembered that a shared oven is a better friend than a proud hearth. You rinse your hands in the warm end of the kettle and rub tallow into the new cracks as if sealing a roof. The room smells of crust and thyme and smoke. It smells for a flicker, like abundance. Night will test that feeling again as it always does. But for now you have loaves on the board marks matched to names, and tomorrow's mercy sleeping under a cloth. Winter can make what face it likes. You have baked it an answer. Afternoon has spent itself on bread and barter, and now the weather remembers its whip hand. You feel it first as a new edge under the door, not the wet cold of morning, but a cleaner cut, the sort that files your nose on the in-breath. The wind has veered round by a point or two and sharpened the frost as neatly as a knife on a boy's boot. Smoke that behaved all day writes a different hand at the hood, a warning without a scold. This is the hour to put the beasts to bed and lay your fire like a miser with a map. Start with the creatures who breathe on your luck. The goat is already debating scripture with the hayrack. You settle the argument by making the manger a small fort against draught. Shake hay from the bale with your hands high, so dust falls where hens can pick their theological share and not into lungs. A fresh twist of straw underfoot keeps the floor from becoming winter porridge. Stamp it level so hooves don't make divots that gather damp. Her pail gets a top up with kettle warm water. neither shock nor indulgence, and you pull it back from the door so an inquisitive horn can't paint the buyer with your good intentions. The hens are an insulted chorus by nature. Soothe them with order. Rake droppings to the midden in a barrow that squeaks its opinion. A dusting of cool hearth ash under the perch tells lice to take their pilgrimage elsewhere. You check feet and combs, because frost makes fools of both a rub of goose fat, while you mutter it's for shine, not pride. Their drinker wears a new lid of ice. Crack and replace, then lift it onto a brick so cold from the earth won't bully it from beneath. Back indoors you fight the days, last skirmish with damp. Clothes that worked for bread are lifted higher on the rail. Boots sit a hand's breadth off the hearthstone, tongues propped wide so they dry like gentlemen, not crisp like sinners. The palliasse is propped again, 2 fingers now, not 1. Damp under straw is a poor man's feversmith. Your drip wicks shine. You ring them and set bowls where even your sleepy shins won't find them in the dark. Quick purges shutter a finger count to 5 while flame behaves down and pin. You've turned a kitchen into weather and you keep it like a steward. Now to the fire which must work all night without swagger and all morning without sulk. Baking left the hearth keen but thirsty. It will spend anything you give it with the appetite of a miller. The trick is to give it shape rather than feasts. You begin by schooling the ember. Pull back the ash until the live heart shows a crescent the width of your palm. Don't pick a fight with the whole bed. You are building a lamp, not a bonfire. Lay 3 slivers of true dry kindling, then a split as thick as your thumb, bridging like a little gallows over the glow. Nurse it with a thread of warm breath through your cloak until the stick answers without hiss. Let that flame stand and prove it knows its letters. Next, you lay the night's geometry. 2 honest splits side by side, a finger's gap between to make a lane for air. A third, crosswise at the far end, a 4th at the near, so you have a silent box with a roof missing room for the ember to creep along and eat carefully, not gulp. If peat is your country's habit, you bed 2 bricks of it outside the embers reach where they can char their edges into obedience before they're asked to carry weight. If wood is your lot, choose the seasoned, not the bragging knot you've been saving to impress a neighbor. Hard woods will keep counsel where proud ones spit. You throttle back the fire's light, not its life. Draw a quilt of ash over the flame until it is a red grammar more than a speech. You should see the glow breathe like a sleeping thing when you purse and blow once. That is the bank fuel with the plan flame with manners. You resist the log that wants applause. Ablaze now is a bill at cockcrow. Wind has turned, remember, and downdraft likes to bring its cheeky cousin to supper when no one asked it. Give the hood a little help. Set a thumb of ember under a candle stub or rushlight at the mouth for a minute, just enough to remind the flue which way is up. Then kill the light. Fire does not need company to learn bad habits. If the wind stamps its foot and shoves smoke back, you don't fling the door and let your heat flee. You lift the shutter a finger count 3 and trust your tidy ember to hold its head. Moisture is a jealous neighbor. All day you've driven it out. Night will invite it back if you steam the room like a bath. Still, a thimble of gentle wet is medicine for throats that have inhaled oven and ash. Hang the kettle not to boil, but to think about it. A thread of visible breath at the spout is enough to keep the nose from cracking its temper and the old man's cough from sharpening. Too much, and the rafters will weep on your cap at matins. Set aside the night's workforce and the morning's reinforcements, where hands in the dark will not get clever. 2 faggots within reach, on the now side, 2 on the night side. You name them aloud and make the child the keeper of the distinction. A flat stone warmed at the oven's mouth goes under the table to heat the floor where toes go to argue with life. The hot stone for the bed drinks from the ember's edge and returns to its post like a faithful old dog. The rag for turning it stays tucked at your belt. Poker cold side out. Chamber pot far with the folded straw mat as insurance. Shoes pointing true. Knife asleep above heads, not where hands dream and find it. The wind has a new song at the eavesless hiss, more scrape. You test the roof pole by touch, pressing it beneath the tie beam with a quarter hand of lift. Not the farmer's jab, that makes a problem where none stood. The thatch answers with a lower note. If the weight wants to shrug, it will do it when the world is meanest. You give it reasons to postpone. Beast breath is part of the night's arithmetic. You bring the goat a bundle of hedge trimmings you saved for sins like this bark, to worry mine to occupy so she doesn't decide your door latch is a puzzle for saints. Hens mutter. You tuck a plait of rush along the byre's draft edge and pin it with a twig. Little walls against an old enemy. You eat sensibly after baking day, which is to say, not like a king whose laws you wouldn't obey. Beans from the oven buttered with dripping if you saved any dignity. A crust re-warmed, not re-crisped into sorrow. A mug of small beer eased towards hot. The old man's portion arrives first, and the child's second. Yours is what happens when the others have agreed with their spoons. Hunger that keeps its manners now won't wake you at the hollow hour to ask for wood you meant for tomorrow. Then you do the counting that has kept poorer houses than yours alive. In your head, bar-set latchcloth, right wicks, rung bowls, placed ember, banked slats, fixed stones, warmed faggots named. You speak it once softly, so your mouth remembers when your fingers forget. The child repeats now and night as if it were their own idea. Good. Make sentries of the small, and they'll fight for you against sleep. At the hearth, you finish the last trick the careful know. You rake a finger width of ash forward from the back, so if a spark grows proud in your sleep, it meets a moat, not a road. You tilt one small stick, so its end just kisses the ember tomorrow's kindling, ready to tell you which way morning is. You sit a minute longer than you feel like, cloak round knees, breath steady, watching for that easy rhythm in the glow that says the fire is not arguing with itself. When it comes, it is like a slow nod from an old friend. That is your curfew. The cap goes down. The watch is shared. You take the first because you know the ember's temper. The old man insists on the second because men at his age take unkindness as a dare. The child's solemn task is to wake a soul if drip or draught grows cheeky. You make the breath cave once for yourself, once for the old man, and teach the child the press and count that warms without wet. The cat chooses your shins with the entitlement of royalty. You accept your subjecthood without argument. Outside the lane is a scripture of ash lines and straw islands, the wands pricking the ditch edges like notes in a margin. The wind worries the thatch and gets boredom for its trouble. Inside, the ember breathes under its ash blanket, alive, modest, exactly enough. You have not squandered the stack you earned kneading and trading. Cockcrow will find a glow waiting to be translated into morning without a quarrel, and wood enough left to see the day behave. You turn your face into wool, close your eyes, and let the house keep you as you have kept it. Wind may write its letters all night if it pleases. Your reply is already on the hearth in a quiet red script. The ember kept its quiet red script. Now you must make it a sentence again without emptying the ink. Dawn is a grey that thinks about admitting it. The room has the feel of a place that could go either way. Either it will stand up into a day or sit back into cold. This is when people spoil what the night saved. First you listen, not just with ears. The thatch hums low rather than creaks wait there, but not a sulk. The goat shifts and answers herself. Hens shuffle but don't scold. The hood at the hearth draws but only just. There's a sly push at the mouth, a downdraft that arrived on tiptoe. Outside the sound is sift on wood, then pause. A wind that writes in little strokes, not long lines. The bell in your head clears its throat rather than sings. You count these as you pull your cap down and your cloak close. They're the sky's small minutes. The ember is old iron under ash. If you bear too much, you'll spend what's left. If you smother in impatience, you'll bury it alive. You do what you've taught your hands to do. Rake a crescent the width of your palm, not a battlefield. Lay the ladder 3 splints of true dry, a bridge of 1 slender split. Breathe through the warmed cloth, not a gust until the orange turns to white, and the white turns to a thin tongue of flame that wants to stand. Resist the log. It wants applause and will give you an hour of boasting, followed by a morning of regret. Pull a shawl of ash half back over the new flame so it eats carefully. The kettle perches at the far lip, not to boil but to share the ember's courage with the room. The sly wind at the hood asks for a little theatre. You light a rushlight stub and hold it near the flue's throat, just long enough to remind the draft which way is up. Pinch it dead before the tallow decides to tell its own story. Breathe once more across the embryo flame. If smoke bows at you, not towards the hood, lift the shutter a finger for a counted 5, and shut again. Trade a sip of sharp air for a bowl full of warm, not the other way round. Now you think about outside. Thaw crusts are winter's practical joke, a skin that holds until it doesn't then hands you the ditch like a gift. You open the door the inch you respect and let your face learn the morning. The lane wears yesterday's ash lines and straw islands like the hand of a careful man. Now the crust lies between them. Your staff will be a better friend than pride. Poke, listen, learn. Where the ash lies grey and matte, the crust is honest. Where it gleams like pewter, it's a liar. Under hedges, the night never warmed enough to form a skin. There the ground is lumpy and true. Across the crown of the lane, the sun, when it comes, will soften what you trust and sharpen what you don't. You catalogue these before you so much as think of a boot outside. Go or stay is not a matter of courage, it's a matter of sums. Signs that say stay. Smoke from chimneys slinks along the hedge before it remembers up. The cock crows once, then changes his mind. Raw needle-fine snow stings your eyelids when you lift the latch. Dogs bark only once, then pretend they didn't. Sound goes a short way and falls over. Signs that say go if you must, and go simple. A faint pale sundog, those little mock sunsat, the edge of the halo that ringed the sun yesterday, more cold but honest. Rooks riding low but moving, not sulking. The bell actually rung by a hand rather than a memory. It means men are abroad. The Reeves boys' footprints across the ash in a straight line with no stagger. It means the crust held for him. Your own door iron dews and then dries in a breath. Your nailheads do not weep. The hood's sulk lifts with a minute of coaxing, not a sermon. That's a maybe. Market, not in this. Mill. Unless you like half the village cursing you when you don't come back with your ankles. Church. It's God's day soon enough. He knows where you live. But if it's the oath you swore or someone's bread depends on your going, then you go with the caution your night earned. Dress for an honest minute made of many. Cap down until it argues with your eyebrows. Cloak pinned so melt runs off, not in. Mitts tied. Patterns if you have them. If not, straw bands round your boots to give teeth to soles. Staff in hand. A twist of rush in your belt, tallow softened to relight a sulky ember at the far end of your errand. A flake of tinder in a waxed scrap. Your tally and a short bit of chalk tucked where you don't have to take off a mitt to find them. A strip of cloth round the latch and the faggot wedge to keep the door from deciding to tell the whole lane your story. If you stay, and most days, you treat the house like a job, not a cave. Water before the crust hardens so much, you have to break it twice. Fodder now, not when the light goes flat. Ash lines freshened on the paths. Wands at the ditch, pressed an inch deeper, so the next fall can't lie about where the edge is. A quick round with the pole where the wind loaded corners again. Straw islands stamped true. All this before the sun does that cruel trick of making everything pretty and treacherous at once. If you must go, you walk like a man carrying a full bowl. Ash line to ash line, not a foot's width off. Staff ahead, tap for hollows, prod for shells. Where the crust holds you, walk flatter, not heavier. Weight spread, not stabbed. Where it fails, you fall small, sideways into your cloak, not arms wide into iron. On the plank by the pigsty, you step short and sure. A long stride is how knees learn stories they didn't ask for. The bridge you tested yesterday gets a second test because bridges learn new tricks overnight. Hedge shade is your friend. The crust there tells fewer lies. Crown in sun is your enemy until the day hardens again. If wind comes sly at your back, unpin your cloak and cradle it so it doesn't make a sail and take you somewhere daft. And if you hunker, and you may, you turn the ember to a day without spending sticks the way fools spend promises. You keep the flame accountant size always there, never grand. Kettle near the lip, so every breath of heat does two jobs. Beans inch closer to done without a proud boil. Yesterday's dough scrap becomes a skillet of ash cakes at the mouth when the clay gives you back heat free. Rushes that spent the night smoking on the rail are peeled and dipped and made ready for the long hush after curfew. Tools get their small courtesies edge licked on the stone haft, rubbed with ash and fat, hinge-pin-oiled latch-cloth checked so the afternoon pays you instead of writing IOUs on your knuckles. The room itself tells you what to do if you watch it like a saint watches a clock. Nail heads on the door bead and don't drip. The purge can be a breath, not a sentence. Rafters above the hood weep, and not just bead kettle off for a quarter hour. Shirts one hand higher on the rail. Drip wicks shining faster than you ring. The eaves have found a path you didn't give them. Move the bowl and the rag before the bowl becomes the floor. Goats stamping straw islands in the byre need another stamp, root split finer. Hens scolding. The ash under the perch has done its sermon and wants renewing. Neighbours' signs matter too. If Rowan's pole stands by his door and not on his shoulder, he's reading the same sky you are. If Hester hangs her broom bristles down by the hinge, she's not walking to the spring. She's telling you stay without knocking. If old Meg's smoke stands straight part way and then drifts, there's a change in the high air and you'll feel it by noon. You trade signs when you trade bread. That's how a street tells itself the weather. You'll be tempted again to buy a big clean heat because you're proud of surviving the night. Pride is wonderful at breakfast and useless by 3. Keep the ember modest and obedient. Let it earn rather than spend. When you must step out to the well to the byre, you take warm air with you in your own little climate cloak at the mouth. Breath into wool. Hands a minute in your armpits before you touch iron. You return without a bill. By the time the grey becomes milk, and the milk thinks of turning to thin sunlight, you've made the day out of carefuls. The ember sits where you left it, a small employer with steady work. There is wood enough for the evening because you didn't give it to the morning to make a point. The hood has remembered its manners. The nail heads have dried. The ash lines keep their promises. You are ready to go if you must. More importantly, you are ready to stay without sulking. You say the list under your breath, bar set, latch cloth, wicks, rung bowls, placed ember-tended paths, marked beasts, mind, and the house repeats it to itself. The sky may lie later, they do, but you have already answered it with a day made from one ember and no drama. The day offers you a fork you can't pretend isn't there. Sky says maybe ash lines say, mind yourself, errands whisper their little lies. You choose go with others, or stay and make a day of it indoors. Either way, winter keeps the book. If you must travel the convoy, go alone, and the lane eats you. Go together, and you become a small machine that can argue with the weather. You make it a convoy, not a stroll. Order. Pathfinder first staff lengthened by caution, patterns firm, cap down. Behind the carriers with loads tight to their middles, not dangling from hands that will numb and betray. Last the rear guard with the roof pole to hook trouble and the ash man with the pouch at his belt to mark a doubt or mend a track. No children, no goats, however they campaign. Loads. Weight rides high and close under the cloak's lee. Tump line across the brow and shoulders, or a back basket laced snug. Nothing swinging. Swinging becomes flailing, and flailing becomes a story at the alehouse about how clever you weren't. Wrap precious things flint, a twist of rush dipped in tallow, a paper of salt in oiled cloth. Wet ruin is worse than weight. If you have a hand sledge, rope it to your waist, not your palms. Pace steady so it doesn't overtake you on the crown and teach you humility. Spacing. 1 staff length between bodies on good going, 2 on crust that lies. Never step precisely in the last footprint when the crust is in a mood. 3 feet in the same lie make a hole. Where hedge throws sound guidance, keep to its shadow. Where the crown glints like pewter trust, as far as you'd trust the Reeves pig. Signals, keep them simple. Staff high and still halt. Staff low wagged once whole. 3 taps with iron on wood ice you can smell with your teeth. 2 taps and a circle drawn with the staff tip we turn for home. A flat palm circling by your ear hood, sulk wait whilst the rushlight trick at the flue is done. Say the words as well, but don't trust wind to be your postman. Crossings. Plank bridges are sermons in winter. Listen before you step. First tap, then heel only. If the plank answers with a ring, its brittle 2 at a time will put you in the brook. Fords are honest if you respect them. Staff ahead feet. Flat cloak, unpinned, so it doesn't decide to be a sail. If the crust carries one and denies the second, the first goes to belly, spreads weight and becomes a bridge. The staff passes back like a treaty. The fallen doesn't stand in a rush roll, then kneel, then feet, or you'll break through again and teach your friends new words. Rests. 5 minutes in the lee of a wall, never in the lane's throat. Breath into the cloak before you lift the mug. Warm hands under armpits, not over steam. Sweat is treachery. Keep it for haymaking and weddings. White out. If the sky makes a blank page, you don't write on it. Rope between first and last if you're fools enough to continue knots every 10 strides. Count aloud. Ash pin each hedge gap on the way out so you can read your own book on the way back. Better turn and follow the ash you left and the wands you set yesterday. Pride is heavier than a sack of rye. Etiquette at doors. You thump snow from cloaks outside, not on a neighbour's floor. You thaw slow hands inside your own wall. Then at the hearthstone's edge, never palm on iron. You leave a little straw where you stamped puddles into paste. You thank a bench as if it were a bed. When you come home, you don't bring the lane in with you. Cloak shakes over the threshold, patterns off on the mat staff, back to its place. Kettle welcomes you because you taught it to. The ember turns back into a day because you didn't spend it showing off at breakfast. If you hunker the longhouse day, staying in is not doing nothing. It's doing the right thing so nothing goes wrong. Repairs that pay twice. Turn the chores into a list you can win. Knife first, stone kisses, not gnaws. A sharp blade keeps blood where it belongs. Axe haft rubbed with ash and fat, so your grip won't lie to you at dusk. Hinges get goose grease. Latches keep their cloths. A ladder rung wants a new peg. Make one before it asks at midnight when you're carrying water. Thatch needles mended whilst fingers have feeling. Little twists of straw bound and ready for patching in thaw. A cracked spoon becomes a good, smaller spoon with 4 patient cuts. Waste is a story people tell to make themselves look better than you. Cloth and cord. Warp the loom if you're grand enough to own one. If not, spin another hank and brag only to yourself about its even twist. Plat rush for the door seam and for lamps yet to be. Peel yesterday's stems to the seam, lay the pith to smoke. Make twine from coarse fleece, and teach the child the cadence twist feed wind and song. The song keeps fingers honest and quarrels out of the room. Food that minds itself. Beans at the hearth's back mutter their way towards supper. A bone from last Michaelmas asks to be coaxed into broth with a bay leaf and a lie about meat. Dripping renders slow if a bit of rind survived the last feast lid, half on room, half thankful. Pickle jars get their nod lid wiped brine poked mould, bullied away. You make a pan of ash cakes at the oven's mouth when its heat is a free gift from yesterday's labour. Boredom's tricks and how to beat them. Idle hands take shutters off just to see the light open doors. For one breath, lay just one good log and peacock the flame. Thumb knives without purpose and decide that the roof wants poking now. So you give hands work before they get ideas. Child sorts peas and counts them by fives, then by 10 sputs a chalk tally next to yours and preens when the marks agree. Old man unpicks a sock beyond mercy and reknits its yarn into something life might love again. Someone carves pegs and someone else sands them with dry rush until they are smooth as a sermon. You set times, purge the shutter on the hour, ring the drip wicks, on the half turn the hot stone with the rag before the embers complain. Rhythm is how tempers don't turn to vinegar. Stories and decent lies. There's a difference. Decent lies are the ones that set a steady pace to a long hour. A saint who warmed his bread with a stare. A king who wore 2 cloaks and gave one to a cow. Stories are the ones that remind the room it's a village, the bell that froze on the clapper. The time the Reeves pig learned curfew, but not theology. The long winter, when the baker marked loaves with crosses. No one could read and everyone understood anyway. Riddles keep tongues kind and eyes brighter, the child asks a bad one. You laugh like it was good and the rafters don't fall in. Keep blood moving, not sweat. The press and count that warmed you at the hollow hour is a day's friend hands, under the cloak, for 20 calves, flex and hold shoulder blades. Kiss, then rest. Broom drills for the young daft ones, sweep. Turn, step, sweep. It's exercise if you call it a game. Stamping on the mat is music if done in time, and with boots that aren't wet. Damp discipline. Every hour, the breath gap. Every hour shirts 1 peg along the rail. Boots checked and tongues propped. The palliasse at 2 fingers of lift until the child moans and then 1.5. Drip wicks rung before the bowl sulks not after. Kettle off when rafters bead. Kettle on when noses complain. Damp is a tyranny you beat with small elections. Neighbourliness at a distance. You don't wander, but you do call. A knock to and name and a sentence through the crack. Wand at your ditch is low. Their answer, pole by hinge, were in. At midday, the lane often does its little chorus 3 pot bangs here, 1 there, no emergency, just still breathing. You answer once and let the quiet return. By the time the light thins to tired milk again, you have turned staying into achieving without drama. Knife-keen pegs made rushes, peeled, beans, half-wise boots, dry cloth, unmolded tempers, whole ember obedient. You haven't stolen heat from midnight or courage from dawn. Whichever road you took, convoy or longhouse day, the rule was the same. Be a machine on purpose, not a passenger of weather. You used signals lists, songs, and small sensible craft to keep the world from grabbing what you couldn't afford to lose. The child plats one last rush and declares it a crown for the goat who declines with dignity. The old man tells the pig story again, improved by the day. The ember breathes without complaint. The door remembers how to open the permitted inch, and no more. The sky sharpens its pencil for evening. Evening arrives with no edges at all. The world beyond the shutter turns to blank parchment, the kind a scribe rubs with pumice until it forgets every word it ever held. Snow doesn't fall so much as appear everywhere at once. Sound goes short and soft. The lane loses its voice, the hedges swallow their own names, and the sky draws a white lid over the village and fastens it with quiet. This is the weather that breeds mischief, not in foxes or thieves, but in minds. Cabin fever is not a modern illness. It lives at the latch and whispers about air. Open it says just a taste. You rehearse discipline instead. You give the room its measured perjure 2 fingers on the shutter 5 counts, while the flame behaves down and pin. The air changes without wasting your day's hoard. The door remains a treaty, not a toy. You set the faggot wedge back against the jamb to remind your hands what they promised your head. Inside, small things swell into quarrels. A cap with the wrong pair of mitts. A blanket edge that insists on turning damp side down. A spoon borrowed, which is to say, moved by a person who swears they were helpful. The old man clears his throat to begin the Reeves pig story, and the child drunk on a day of being good says, "We know." That little word holds a whole war if you let it. You don't. Peace is work like any other. You start with jobs that look like kindness. The child becomes wickmaster drip wicks rung on the half-hour bowls, emptied into the ash rag, rehung with a flourish. The old man is stone steward. Hot stone turned with the belt rag on the hour, not 5 minutes after. You appoint yourself ash keeper ember, lidded ember, lifted ember, taught to speak quietly. Titles turn tasks into honors, honors quiet tempers. You lay out a schedule. You can win written not with ink, but with repetition. At the bell in your head, call it 6 purge ring, turn the stone, check the latch cloth. Half-past shirts, 2 pegs along the rail, boots' tongues propped wider, besom a quick sweep to bully melt back out of the threshold. On the hour, ember breath-tested purse blow. Watch the glow answer, goat watered with a sip of kettle-warm hen perch dusted with a pinch of ash. Curfew bells ghost a finger round every seam door shutter, sill feel for drafts that learned new tricks when the world went white. Cabin fever tries again. It dresses up as grand ideas. Let's dry everything at once, says pride. You refuse. Wet stacked close becomes a choir for mold by dawn. You keep the rails spaced like good manners, a hand between shirts sleeves turned, so smoke can read them. Nothing heavy hung low where it will learn to sulk. A big log would cheer us, says folly. You smile at it like a neighbor you choose not to borrow from. The night fire is an accountant, not a minstrel. You feed it lean and clever, across of finger-thick splits, with lanes for breath, ash pulled like a quilt. until the flame stops boasting and starts earning. Quarrels have telltale creaks the way roofs do. Voices grow hard at the edges. Hands move faster than sense. A laugh comes too quick and dies too flat. You answer with pattern interrupts that don't cost heat. A counting game. Name 5 things that smell of summer. Time. Tar on a cartwheel. New bread you allow it twice. Sheep-washed fleece. A pond at noon. Or a riddle with a silly answer. What runs but has no legs? The ale when the reeve arrives. The old man snorts complaint forgotten, and the child adopts the riddle as if they'd invented it. You stage a little market on the table. Pins 2 pegs, 6 a twist of thread, 3 ash cakes, a heel of bread, and 1 smug onion. Chalk marks become prices. Barter becomes play. Cross voices become sellers' patter. The whiteout outside teaches tricksy acoustics. Knocks arrive muffled, shifted. You drill the ritual again so fear doesn't get to make the rules, later 2 raps and a name. You answer with the name and a state we're in, and no one lifts a bar for cheerfulness in the dark. You keep the skillet and ladle ready. 3 blows is the village's help, and the white air carries iron better than tongues. When the mind picks a fight with the body, you move without sweat. The press and count you learned at the hollow hour keeps tempers whole now. Hands under cloak for 20 release. Shoulders kiss and part calves flex and rest. A minute of broom drill step sweep turn becomes a game, not a chore. You stamp the mat to a beat quiet thunder that reassures the rafters you're still there. Whiteout brings a false spring of thoughts. People open shutters for a look and pay for it with heat. People declare a thirst for clean air and find ice teaching their lungs manners. So you give the mind images without the latch. The letterbox zone slat shows enough head shoulders under white caps ash lines, faithful wands pricking the ditch edge like a row of quiet notes. You close before the room tries to chase the picture. You can't stop the itch to meddle with the roof when the world is silent. The pole by the hinge tempts a jab just to be sure. Don't. Weight travels where you don't see. Snow that sits is insurance. Snow that slides at your bright idea becomes a door jam you'll hate at midnight. If you must, you test 1 stripe and listen. Tonight you listen instead. Low luxuries keep tempers sweet without stealing tomorrow. A pebble warmed and rolled in 2 hands. A strip of apple if the hedge was kind in autumn, baked at the ovens slack and shared like contraband. A cup of almost tea kettle breath with a leaf of thyme for the old man's rasp. A crumb for the goat in exchange for orthodox behavior near the latch. The ember needs guardianship, not drama. On the half hour, you lift the ash, a finger, show it 1 bright eye, feed it 2 slivers, not 3, and remind it to be a citizen. A candle stub at the hood for a count of 10 coaxes the draft, then dies with dignity. You set a moat of cool ash before the hearths, lip a pale line, a hand wide, so any proud spark meets humility. The prong stick leans with its cool end out where a fool's hand won't learn iron the hard way. The chamber pot lives far steady and still, straw folded by it for apology. Shoes point true to morning. Privacy is as warm as wool in a long house. You hang the cloak like a little wall while the old man coughs or the child sulks into usefulness. You turn your back on purpose while someone mends stockings and gives up pretending not to care who sees. You keep your voice low when it wants to climb. Noise is contagious. Quiet can be too. When the white presses in enough to fray the room, you make a tiny ceremony to keep meaning alive. The rushlight loses an inch. You trim it and mark the inch on the table, with chalk-cone more gone, one fewer to go. The child draws a goat beside it, with antlers they do not possess. You do not correct art that warms a house. The old man hums a psalm that is mostly breath and memory. You scratch today's, date your own way, onto the hood with a stick. Not numbers, but a bell, a loaf, a pole, a star. The soot records a winter in pictographs. Spring will wash it, but you will have read it. You don't forget neighbor signals in the hush. At the depth of evening, 3 spaced taps sound from Rowan's doorpost. You reply with 2 and a name. Hester's lad thumps the frozen bucket rhyme 1-1 to say their water is fetched and they're in. Old Meg laughs through her nose at nothing and therefore everything. It is the shortest sermon that still works. When voices itch for a fresh quarrel, you offer useful fuss. Count the faggots once more now and night. Check the nail heads for dew. Find the warmest point on the rail and rotate shirts 1 peg. Where does the draft kiss your shin? Show me. The body finds a purpose and the tongue forgets its plan. You save the best story for the moment, just before the first watch never at full dark. Once told a good tale leaves a silence that fills with unhelpful thoughts. You want that silence when people are supposed to sleep. Outside, the white intensifies until even your own ash lines look like myths. Inside, you keep the ledger of small victories. Wicks rung on time. Ember breathed and behaving. Stovestone turned, not burned. Shirts drying, not weeping. Boots warm, not crisp. Goat drinking, not plotting. Child crowned the goat with a rush plait. Without getting buttered, a miracle you permit yourself to enjoy. Old man's cough stays at wicker, not iron. And when the quiet deepens into that peculiar late evening hum, the sound of wool giving up its last chill and wood learning to be home, you set watches again with the respect of sailors handing over a wheel. Your list becomes the liturgy. Bar set cloth right bowls, placed wicks, rung, moat, laid shoes pointing stone, warm prongs, cool side-out faggots now and night. Everyone repeats a piece. Everyone owns a piece. That is how a house remains a republic when the world outside turns to a monarchy of snow. The last thing before first sleep is a gentle ban on heroics. No one opens a door to see if it's still white. It is. No one proves bravery to the hood with a proud log. Pride burns fast and leaves regrets shaped like fingers. No one tests the latch with bare skin. Iron has never yet yielded to curiosity. You all agree to these ancient laws without the theatre of oaths, and the room relaxes because it can. The white presses its ear to the shutter and hears nothing to argue with. The rushlight burns down its last quarter without sulks. The ember breathes like a modest animal under ash. You pull the cap over your brow, make the breath cave for yourself, and then for the old man. and let the goat proclaim orthodoxy by lying down with her nose to her knees. Tomorrow will open the lid and write in a different hand. For now, you have kept peace with people's schedule and fire when the world refused to have edges. That is most of not freezing. You wake into the thinnest fraction of night, the bit that isn't quite anything. The rushlight has eaten itself down to an inch of stubborn. The ember under its ash quilt is more rumor than red. Everything is poised. The rafters hold their breath. The goat is a neat comma on her knees. The old man's chest keeps time like a tired clock. This is the last vigil, when people undo a night by trying to finish it fast. You move like a miser, cap still down, cloak up, hands into your own ribs until they remember their hands, not stones. The ember is there faint and old. You pull ash back a palm's width, not a finger more, and find one live eye. Ladder of splinters, a single bridge split, breath through cloth warmed under your cloak. The little tongue stands. You do not let it boast. Ash slides back over until it is a red grammar again, not a speech. The kettle moves an inch closer to borrow courage without turning bold. This is the hour people spend wood out of fear or pride. You don't. You work the third way, one last time press and count inside the blanket. Turn the hot stone with the rag you kept at your belt. Lend 5 warm breaths to the old man through the cloak cave. Shuffle the child a hand towards the bed's middle and take their cooling place yourself. Tuck wool over wrist and ankle where heat leaks like gossip. You stiffen the edges, rush plait jammed at the threshold seam, straw teased into the shutter's pinched corner, the chamber pot where it can't be kicked into a story. You let the ember be a citizen. It obeys. The roof speaks no drama, just a lower note, as the white weight thinks about loosening. The rag wicks shine you ring and rehang by reflex. Bowls empty into ash where water can't shout. The hood sulks briefly. A rushlight stub kisses the flue's throat for a count of 10, then dies politely. Smoke remembers up. The room is yours by craft, not by luck. And then that odd bare quiet, the moment before cockcrow, when even the frost seems to lean forward to listen. The sky is dark pewter at the shutter edge, but thinner than it was. Your stomach tries breakfast as if the night owed you one. You give it a sip of almost tea from the kettle's lip steam, with a thought of time and a soldier of re-warmed crust for the child, because victory tastes better shared. The old man refuses twice and accepts once. His cough stays wicker, not iron. The goat opens one eye and closes it with theological approval. Cockcrow comes as a question rather than an announcement. Then a second, braver time. Dawn begins to unfasten the white lid. This is when the first rescues and the first mistakes walk out together, arm in foolish arm. A door down the lane thuds too bold. You hear the rest of the story in shapes, the woomph of a slab, shrugging off a thatch that would have waited. A gasp, a laugh too loud, pride pretending to be fine. You keep your own latch at an inch. Your roof pole stands where you left it. Your trench below the eaves takes the fall you would otherwise be wearing. You count to 5 while the room keeps its heat, and only then open to the inch you've earned. The lane is a page again. Your ash lines run thin and true. Straw islands hold. Wands at the ditch prick their polite warnings. Thaw crust has formed ugly and clever. You tap with your staff and learn the morning's lies dull, where it will carry once bright, where it will carry twice, and then betray you. Smoke from Rowan's chimney goes up sulks sideways, then thinks better. He's coaxed his hood with the same small theatre. Hester's broom hangs bristles down by her hinge her sign, for we're hunkering, not walking. Old Meg's door opens the permitted inch and sneers at the sky. The Reeves pig announces new philosophy somewhere near the midden. You choose rescue before victory. You wedge your door with the faggot pin, your cloak tie your mitts, take the staff. Hinge post side always. First to your own eaves, a neat stripe tap, not jab, combing the cap down into the trench you made last night. Then 2 houses along with the pole, because you heard that foolish thud. Rowan meets you with his hook and a face that says, "We nearly made a tale. Together, loose, clear mark." Ash pinched out in stingy lines. Straw pad stamped flat at the worst bit by his step. A wand thrust by the lip of the ditch where a person with more optimism than sense thinks it is path. Now the inventory, because a day needs counting as much as a night. You do it aloud to make it real. Wood, 2 faggots on now 3 on night, and a decent stack you didn't squander at the hollow hour. 4 splits seasoned. 1 knot you still refuse to be tempted by. 2 peat bricks charred and ready if wind turns cussed. Fire ember obedient. Ash mote a hand wide before the lip. Poker cool side out. Prongs leaning safe. Rushlight ends 3. Rushes drying 6. Tallow enough for a week if you're stingy. Water bucket lidded in half. Kettle half. Ice iron hooked by the door. Well lid cleared. Rope cloth sound. Food bread down to a good heel, and tomorrow's leaven asleep under its cloth. Beans 2 bowls. Bones promising a broth with lies later. Onions 3. Salt, a paper and a pinch, thank Meg. A smear of dripping. A miser's pinch of time. Small beer honest. Cloth and kit shirts spaced and nearly dry. Hose darned. Mitts tied. Patterns sound. Stuff true. Knife keen. Axe haft greased. Hinge quiet. Latch cloth tight. Broom bristles still thinking like bristles. Straw floor decent. Buyer a fresh twist. Bed raised 2 fingers and not weeping. Paths ash lines fresh. Straw pads pinned. Wands as high as knees. Plank at the pigsty dusted. Bridge tested. Hedge shade ready. People old man breathing in time. Child awake with a job in their hands. You capable of the next 5 minutes and therefore the day. Go to Dop's orthodoxy anew. Hens scold in the healthy way. You add the village to the count without marching it. 2 iron taps from Rowan's post you answer with 1 and his name. Hester's lad thumps the bucket rim 111 wherein. Water sorted. Don't come. Old Meg sings something that might be a charm and might be mockery. Either way, the sound is warm. The alehouse knocks twice and leaves it at that. Their settle is carrying 2 strangers and a dog. The room is already a weather of its own. Back in you translate ember to morning without wasting a stick. Splinters wake it. A single bridge split gives it grammar. Ash quilt goes back on to keep it working and not boasting. Kettle to the lip. Pan near for ash cakes at ovens slack. The room's small weather obeys purge to the count of 5. Drip wicks rung. Bowls placed where your shin won't find them at midnight. Boots, tongues propped. Shirts 1 peg along. Palliasse 1 finger higher. You've turned the list into a day. The first neighbor mistake of light is always the same. Someone brave with dawn opens wide for 1 good breath, puts hand to bare iron, and learns the language of skin with an oath. You do not gloat. You send the child with a rag-wrapped pebble, warm from the hearth, and an onion end to rub into the welt village medicine as old as scorn. That small kindness is part of the ledger too. By full greying hope is less of a liar. The cock is louder. The bell actually rings from a hand. Smoke stands up straight for a count of 10 before it wanders. You decide no market, no mill path, say later. A short roof round, then the indoor work that saves a longer tomorrow. You draw the bar test, the lift, and drop twice rehearse the watch even though day is awake. Habit is what rescues you when judgment forgets itself. You survive the night, not by a miracle, but by 100 plain obediences to ash, to wool, to breath, to pole, to path, to the modesty of heat. You banked, you rotated, you pinched, you wrung, you counted, you shared. The world gives you back a day, not because it is kind, but because you made yourself hard to take. At the table, you scratch in soot the last of your winter pictographs a bell for the hour, kept a loaf for the bread, shared a pole for the roof, round, a small star for the white out that tried to own you and didn't. The child adds a goat with antlers again. You let the mistake stand. The old man laughs and fails to cough halfway through. That is victory. If there is a moral, it is a boring one, which is how you know it's true. You didn't triumph. You maintained, you tended and refused and deferred and remembered. You let no single greed of air flame light pride steal from the ledger of the next hour. That is how people lived through nights like this and found themselves in spring to boast about it. You step to the door and open it the inch you deserve. Air comes in that is no longer a thief. The thatch shrugs its last civil sheet into your trench. The ash lines look like writing you can read. Somewhere a cart will impose its will on the lane again, and mud will return with its own politics. You'll miss the neatness of ash and straw, and you'll be glad to see green when it comes. For now, cockcrow ember obedient people counted wood sufficient wits in working order. One night you were told you wouldn't survive. The truth is quieter. One night survived is a list kept, and a dozen temptations refused. If you had to do it again tonight, you could. You hope you won't. You prepare as if you will. That is winter's catechism, and you've learned it by heart.